Yes?
Original intent.
Original intent. What was the original intent of the framers? This was dealing with ways to interpret the Constitution. What was the original intent of the framers? Go ahead, Angel.
Wasn't it, like the original intent was for it to be very broad so it could be interpreted in different ways?
You could argue that, but if you're reading the Constitution using original intent, how are you making the decision as far as what it means? Go ahead.
Reading it and considering it as like keeping in mind what the founding fathers and people who wrote it meant.
Yeah. Original intent of the framers means that you need to interpret the Constitution. You need to go back and you need to kind of research what the founding fathers meant, and then you need to apply that original intent to the case at hand, and then you'll get the ruling. Do you remember the examples that I had given you of original intent? All the classes got these. Go ahead. Polygamy, yeah. Why did they say? Because if you remember, they struck down the idea of people legally being able to participate in polygamy using original intent. Do you remember why? Because the Constitution says Congress shall make no law abridging the free exercise of religion. It sure seems like this should be allowed. They said polygamy was not present at the time the founding fathers were there. They couldn't have intended to protect that if it wasn't here. They would have written the First Amendment differently. And you could argue that if you just look at the meaning of the words, polygamy should probably be legal. Can you remember the other example that I had? Go ahead.
Roe v. Wade.
Not Roe v. Wade. Close. ERA. What was the ERA? Equal Rights Amendment. Go ahead, Alejandro.
Equal Rights Amendment. And there were three parts to the ruling. It was equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the U.S. or any other state on account of sex.
On account of sex or gender, yes. That's really the key thing on this. And if you remember, the intent of this was dealing with economics. It was dealing with jobs. It was dealing with promotions. It was dealing with pay. And I guess the example I had given you was, it really wouldn't be that big of a stretch to have read legalizing gay marriage into the Equal Rights Amendment. But if you remember on this, that was not the intent of the framers. But reading the wording, you could argue that this would have allowed it, because if you're going to allow same-sex, or pardon me, if you're going to allow heterosexual marriage in a traditional sense, but not same-sex marriage, that would seem to be discrimination on account of sex or on account of gender. Any others? Go ahead. I'm sorry? ERA was the Equal Rights Amendment. Go ahead, one more time, Alejandro, read that
Equal
off.
Rights Amendments. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the U.S. or any other state on account of sex.
And the example of this again was the marriage idea.
And this was never passed.
The ERA was never passed. Original intent was designed to create economic equality. Original intent was designed to create economic equality. However, the problem is that if you just look at the meaning of the words, it could have created a little bit more right in there. And this is where we started to get into women on the front line and who you wanted to come up to your third floor window if your building was on fire and help you get out. You know, we talked about a number of different things, and people got angry at each other. It was kind of fun. Go ahead, Angry V.
The Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse Rock. There were two Schoolhouse Rocks. Do you remember them?
We only watched one.
Oh, they're both posted, though.
Okay.
Yeah, I promise that. Do you remember the Schoolhouse Rocks?
The first one was life, liberty, and the pursuit.
First one was dealing with the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Absolutely on this. And if you go back and you look at this, remember the wording that deals with the Declaration of Independence. Some people say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is in the Constitution. It's not. It's from the Declaration of Independence. And that's really what we talked about. And life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What was the pursuit of happiness originally? Life, liberty, and property. Kind of keep that thought in mind. The second one was the preamble. And when I showed y'all the preamble one, we had discussed this idea of some things that maybe were a little bit, inaccurate, like the woman trying to be able to vote but never quite reaching the ballot box. But if you remember with the preamble, that's we the people. And some people think that we the people is in the no, it's not in the Declaration, it's in the preamble. Some think that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is in the preamble. No, that's in the Declaration of Independence. So make sure that you're clear with those. What else have you got from chapter 2? Yes?
Balancing.
What was balancing? And John, you're stopping it and restarting it, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. What was balancing? Oh, shame. Not checks and balances. Balancing was a way to interpret the Constitution. Vomit.
It must be a
Oh.
reasonable search and seizure plan.
It was. Balancing is the idea that sometimes you're going to have to balance competing provisions in the oh, this is going to be a bad Friday, y'all, man. Y'all better step this up. I'm being serious. Balancing is the idea that sometimes you have to balance competing provisions in the Constitution. And sometimes something is going to have to win over the other. You could argue in the cheerleader case, if you remember with the Texas cheerleaders from the paper, okay, the cheerleaders were claiming freedom of speech. The people that were challenging them were saying this is a religious issue, so you're balancing different parts of the First Amendment. The example I had given you in class was vomit. What was the vomit case?
They forced some guy suspected of drug dealing. They took to throw up. They pumped his stomach with the intent of getting the drugs out to save the evidence.
Why did they pump his stomach?
Because he'd swallowed a bunch of drugs.
They saw something. Well, we don't know exactly. But if you remember, I came over to the side of all the rooms, and I swallowed really loudly, and it hurt. Yeah, I know, it's pretty gross. Yeah, this guy swallowed evidently something, and they thought it was morphine, and all of the classes thought that he had actually swallowed something illegal. They thought he swallowed morphine, but we weren't quite sure. So the police officers took him to the hospital, took him against his will, gave him to a medical professional. The medical professional made him vomit against his will or pumped his stomach. And in fact, they fished through the vomit on the cool tile floor of the hospital. And they found the very morphine that was in their warrant. Was it legal?
No.
Why, Angry V?
Because they didn't do it to save his life or anything. They did it for the evidence.
The police went in there and they said, we need you to pump his stomach in order to save the evidence so that we can gain a conviction. And the Supreme Court, if you remember on this, Justice Felix Frankfurter said, this shocks my conscience. How can you take a man against his will, make him vomit in the hospital in the middle of the night, and then fish through his vomit to gain evidence? This is not legal. And in fact, they struck this down. This is why police, if they're doing something to save your life, can in fact get evidence sometimes. However, if they're doing something to save the evidence, that's not legal because of this particular case. Do y'all remember the case? Go ahead, V.
So balancing, you said, is what again?
So basically, you're balancing this right of a search and seizure, an unreasonable or a reasonable search and seizure, versus the police's ability to collect evidence and to conduct a fair trial. And in this case, they came down on the side of, this is an unreasonable search and seizure, and the person that was searched won.
So balancing isn't like for a general sense.
Balancing is you're balancing competing rights, so by themselves they should win, but if they go up against each other, one of them is going to have to lose, so you got to balance the different considerations. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. The choking case.